Colleague Linda Mnisi is among the journalists who were listening to the Premier of Gauteng there. Linda, you've heard the statement I've had to make. I don't understand how it is that government officials just crop up whenever there is a crisis and start speaking the right language. We have been asking for months on end, where is political leadership in order to counter what Operation Dudula has been doing? Only now he's coming out.
And, you know, well, it's quite interesting listening to the Premier there saying that South Africans continue to complain that police are not on the ground, and when they're on the ground, they complain again, which begs the question, Oli, around whether or not police are trained to deal with civilians. They've allowed, movements like the Operation Dudula to operate in these communities. And what we're seeing today is not different from what Operation Dudula has been doing, knocking on people's doors and really, just stopping anybody that they're seeing on the streets to ask whether or not they are South Africans. I mean, there was one incident where one gentleman was asked to describe what an elbow is. I mean, those kind of things that take us back to, where South Africa really comes from. And it turned out that the gentleman is actually from South Africa, from Malamulele. He is Tsonga, Oli, and his aunt saying that this is not the first time that it's happened in her family. Her child was also stopped earlier this year, and this is the kind of treatment that ordinary South Africans are getting from this kind of law enforcement. Really no level of accountability from what the Premier is saying in terms of the conduct that we're seeing here on the ground, but in fact praising the fact that there is a tactical response team that has now responded. However way they respond, the community should just accept that.
Linda, there's another element to these government officials and the tone of language that is slightly switching. When Bheki Cele came there the first time around, he's going to be in Diepsloot today for the third time, as we've been mentioning in past bulletins. When he arrived there the first time around, he was standing almost on top of the mountain, beating his chest about how the people who are the ones who are renting out properties to illegal migrants are going to have to answer. I listened to him yesterday. The language completely toned down, completely changed. People like him must be held to account for the chaos that is going on, as much as he's a government minister, but he also has to account for his actions.
Absolutely, Xoli, because also what you see, how that translates on the ground in terms of what happens. You're talking about an incident on Wednesday when he was speaking about these issues and residents warning him that in fact if he does nothing about the issue around criminality in this area, they'll be going into the area themselves and ridding the streets of undocumented migrants. What happened overnight was the issue of the killing of Elvis Nyathi, who till today nobody has been arrested. You see the way that they're doing their operation, and the only people that are getting arrested seems to be the low-lying fruit, if I may put it that way, the undocumented migrants. If they find you on the street, that's how they are doing it. The attitude from the ground, in fact, we had an opportunity as police were going around to also speak to some of the community members, and I heard one of the community members in fact saying that Ekmele Bahambe Mabahab. There isn't that level of education in terms of, letting people know, these processes, but also in the way that they're doing it. They're doing exactly what we've been seeing over the past few weeks, that knocking on people's doors is okay. Where is the Department of Home Affairs who know fully how these processes are handled, who would know whether someone is in the country legally or not? In fact, in South Africa, we also have stateless people. How do they differentiate between those who are born in South Africa but simply don't have, identity documents to identify as South Africans? What happens to those, and where do they deploy them to? So this is a process that was supposed to have been taken from the onset by the Department of Home Affairs, but also taking accountability for things like their reception offices who have been closed, who have backlogs, and having people waiting for asylums and for documents, so all of these things ultimately speak to the failure of that department to make sure that things happen and they work.
It's a layered conversation that you and I are having at the moment. I'm going to let you go in a second. Let me put this final question to you, because when all is said and done, this is all about a competition for scarce resources. It's a competition for the services that are delivered by government. It's a competition for jobs. And I just had a conversation with the finance minister, and incidentally, the Gauteng Premier also addressing the element about a township economy, that conversation cropping out of the woodworks again.
Yeah, indeed, Pole. The Premier saying that, in fact, he's been in conversations with the MEC for a small business here in Gauteng and urging them to come out and start working, saying that the province has adequate leadership. And it begs the question, where have they been? It's not like we are waking up to this reality now, or suddenly this was an ambush and we have migrant business owners in South African townships. These things have been happening for a very long time, which goes back to the issue around policies and how they are implemented. Now we have a situation where government is reactive and saying they have programs to address these issues, but those programs are currently not implemented. Those programs are not happening because, as we saw this morning, police are entering migrant-owned businesses and they are taking them out for failing to have the right documentation, for failing to reveal, whether they are allowed to be operating in the spaces that they're operating in right now.